one of the prettiest days. I've lived in West Seattle for 37 years, and driving down here today on Orleans, just that view with the park off to the right that we're here to talk about, and the Olympics across the way, and the air so clear. This has to be a sacred place to be, a sacred ground that we stand upon. Acknowledging the indigenous folks that were here first, and whom we all joined together in 1851, and made this a special place to be and to live and to celebrate life that it is. So welcome all of you. We had hoped to have David Berge here today. He's the tribal historian for the Duwamish tribe. And to give an acknowledgement for the indigenous lands that we stand upon. So he'll be here tomorrow, and he's been such a help to us all the way through in terms of bringing the indigenous perspective on this park and this area to these amazing students who have produced this grand dream that we all get to share it. I look forward to hear your comments and things. So, but I'd like to read to you what's in the first paragraph of our most recent edition of Eagle Eye over Alki, Eagle Eye on Alki, our newsletter. The Schmitz Park Creek Restore Project is working actively to both acknowledge and honor the history of Seattle's indigenous people and the history that surrounds and embraces the ancient forest and the lands that comprise and surround Schmitz Reserve Park. These lands were occupied, stewarded, and protected for centuries by the indigenous people of this area. The stewardship and occupation were in place long before the lands were set aside as a park and nature reserve. This project seeks to restore, protect, and celebrate this unique remnant of the ancient natural landscape as it was before it was enveloped and occupied by Seattle's urban development. Schmitz Park Creek Restore is being aided in this work by the input and goodwill of Seattle's Duwamish tribe, the Muckleshoot tribe, and other tribes in the area. We're glad to be here. I'd like to call for a moment. We have begun a very interesting dialogue with the Muckleshoot tribe about this area in agreement with the Duwamish tribe. Unfortunately, their brilliant young tribal member, John Bailey, passed away this fall. And had that not happened, I know that he is with us here in spirit, and we honor and welcome his spirit and that tribe to what we're doing here. We also have with us today, so in 1908, something really wonderful. Seattle was booming in the wake of the gold rush and all the building and growth that came after the Great Seattle Fire, and the Schmitz family came to town, and then Ferdinand. And with us today are two of their granddaughters who grew up in West Seattle and near here, Nancy Schmitz Wilson and Patsy Schmitz Carpenter. Ladies, thank you so much for being here. And with them, we also have Gail and Ken Fulton and Chris Brown, who are also members of the Schmitz family, and welcome them. Karen, forgive me. Thank you. Vicki Schmitz sends her regards. Vicki Schmitz Rock, she's been a fire plug with us from the get-go. Clay Eels said, you need to talk to Vicki Schmitz. She's a good egg, and she has proven to be, and she's given us great help and encouragement as we go along here. Also with us today, I haven't seen him yet. Bruce, are you here? No, he's been to come to our Bruce Stotler intends to come and visit the exhibit. Bruce Stotler has been an inspiration too. Bruce and his wife both work for the city of Seattle. They have lived for years in a house that's right on the southeastern edge of the park. And Bruce has worked with parks so that the land in the house that he has occupied will become part of the park. So 53 acres will become almost 54 acres sometime in the future, but stay with us for a long time, Bruce. And I honor him and encourage him. Also want to call out Art Wolf, Cheryl Eastberg, and Phil Renfrew, and I know Phil is here. Phil and Cheryl both work for Seattle Parks over some of Phil's famous crab cakes in the Arroyos. We sat one night and said, you know what, we think we can really do this, get people together, get a community of diverse and joyful people together that love West Seattle and love this park, and do something to protect the park, restore it, and to reconnect that creek to the water. We have Patrick Robinson with us here from West Side Seattle. We have Tracy Sand here with the West Seattle blog. Thank you all for being here to tell our story. Today. lovely. Then I'll move on. Teresa Mosqueda, are you here? I haven't seen you yet. No, thanks. Sorry? I still didn't hear that. Exactly, great, thank you. So we've had, been talking to Ken Strauss, Teresa Mosqueda, and other city council members about what we're up to here. We're talking to Bruce Harrell's office because we realize that a project like this is going to go forward in the city. It needs support from all levels, and we've been encountering goodwill wherever we reach out. Our great friend in this project has been Seattle Parks. Thank you, Seattle Parks, and we have here today Jonathan Garner right over here. They've been encouraging us and encouraging the students to dream big, imagine what this park could be now and in the future. And Jonathan, care to say hello to everyone?
Hi everybody, I'm Jonathan. I'm the senior planner of the Parks Department in the planning unit. I want to say thanks to Dan and the Schmitz Creek Restore Group for this big project, big lofty goal. We really appreciate that. Thanks to Paul and his guidance and expertise from Hood Studio. It's been great. And really big thanks to all the students here as I walk around and look. I see big dreams, I see bold visions, I see leadership in this. I think that's what Parks needs to find these types of projects that can really reconnect and make these big dreams happen. So thank you all for that, and hope you enjoy.
I'd like to also call out Jonathan's colleagues, Danielle Devier, who's been very helpful with this project and who's a West Seattle person through and through, and also Amanda Barnett, who's a very key person at Parks for new development projects like this. Seattle Public Utilities, we've been working closely with them because if we were to get the stream connected back to Alki Beach, we have to get underneath Alki Avenue where all the utilities are. That also means that Seattle Public Utilities can participate financially in what we propose to do here someday. Also here today is someone I've been dying to meet and talking to the phone a lot, and that is Mary Pearson, who is a neighbor, and she and her late husband Charlie Chong started a project with the College Street Ravine Protective Area, which is a side stream to the stream that comes out of Schmitz Park. And Mary, we're delighted that you're here today. Thank you and welcome. I see that Southwest Seattle Historical Society Elizabeth Rookwood is here. Thank you, Elizabeth, for support and encouragement and photos you've lent us. We have folks here from the Stone Cottage. Deb Barker and Mike Shaughnessy had to leave. We're kind of hoping that through this Schmitz Park vision, we'll be able to find a home for the Stone Cottage here near Alki Beach. I'd like to introduce my Schmitz Park team. I have Brian Barrio standing right here, who's been my colleague right from the get-go. Dave Peterson is running around here. Dave has a great background with WSDOT and putting streams underneath the highways, so we're glad to have his expertise. Rob Howe is our director of GEEK. He's down in San Jose, where geeks belong, and keeps us up and on the line. Mitch Grosby is here. He's a well-connected with garden societies here in Seattle and supplied the beautiful wreaths that are there by the door. We've had help from Anne Marie Ogle. Norman Sigler is here somewhere. Where are you, Norman? He's our political contact person. There he is. Where are you, Norman? There you are. Hey. Not here today, but very helpful, and you should all pay attention. Eric Bell Jr., he and his brother have started a project that removes invasive species in public places all around West Seattle and elsewhere. Incredible work. I was working with him a couple weeks ago after the cyclone, clearing trees from Schmitz Park. And you'll be happy to know all the big trees survived fine. One dramatic thing happened. One of the big branches off the redwood tree, there are 2 redwood trees in the park, someone planted them, maybe Patsy or Nancy know, came crashing down, so some of them were clearing redwood branches as well. That's Schmitz Park. This started out and remains a simple project. In spite of all you see right here, I want you not all to panic, but also I want you to be excited, because it started with, I've lived here 37 years, been through that park many times, and think, why does this stream, that beautiful stream that comes from artesian water that seeps out of the ground, why does it go down into the storm sewer? And so the basic kernel of truth here is There are lots of good ecological reasons why that stream should be reconnected to Alki Beach and the salmon run and other aquatic species restored to the forest and to our lives. So that's the core of this project. If we can do that, we will have been a great success, and we will have honored the legacy that M. Ferdinand Schmitz and the Olmsted brothers meant to leave us, which was a park and a green corridor that connects and reminds everyone of what was here before. And as I said, since ancient times, as the Schmitz family gives the city in 1908, West Seattle was blessed with 53 acres of ancient forest. And I'm sure you've all been there. Go again and see those trees that have been waiting for us to respect them and to honor them in the ways that we're proposing here. It needs our help to survive. There's ivy and other invasives on their way into this forest. Trampling has been going on, particularly since COVID. A lot of more people have discovered the park, and one of the risks of going public with a project like this is more people will come. So we're establishing an Ivy League of people that will be both leaders that go in the park and remove ivy and do other things to protect the park, and greeters, rangers that will be at the entrances to the park, welcoming people and reminding them of how to behave in the park and how to celebrate the beautiful things that there are to see there, the living things. A remarkable thing. We have felt that there have been spirits. I heard Ken Workman early on from the Duwamish tribe speak about that the bones of our ancestors are in the ancient trees. And we have felt all along that the spirits of West Seattle, whoever they are, have been guiding us in this journey. And today, as I was leafleting the neighborhood around the Alki playfield, at the southeast corner, I run into an elderly gentleman with a long, long beard that I immediately recognized as, I forget I think he went by Alan Shaw. He grew up here on Alki Point, and for years he stewarded the park through the Friends of Schmitz Park. He happened to be out today for one of the first times since he had a bad bicycle accident, and we just happened to run into each other and said, I know you, my daughter saw you taking care of the park. And he said, yes, it's me. So there we go. He now knows about us and what we're up to at East. With that, I want to thank my friend Paul Hefner. If any of you go to the arts, we have been getting tremendous and mysterious coverage in Encore magazine with full-page ads telling you to come visit Schmitz Park. And that is thanks to Paul Hefner, who's a longtime friend. He's not here today, but he sends his regards and is glad to support what we're doing. Jack Miller at Husky Deli has become a great friend of the park. He's supplied us with beautiful food that we'll enjoy today. And at this point, I'm going to shut up and get to watch, because it's time for Paul Peters, who's right over there, who's the instructor at the University of Washington School of Built Environments.
That's right.
Who contacted us 3 days after we kind of did a mini launch of this at Art Wolf's place and said, I want your project. And so we said, you can have our project, we can work alongside you, and we have. So he brought us these 9 amazing students that you're about to hear from, and for Paul to envision what Schmitz Park and the creek would be. Paul, it's yours.
Thank you very much, Dan. I appreciate that. I just wanted to thank everyone today for coming out. Beautiful day, Alki Beach. And as Dan mentioned, back in May, thanks to the West Seattle blog, I heard about this wonderful group and this idea of bringing salmon back to the ancient forests of Schmitz Reserve. And I actually live in West Seattle and go there with my 7-year-old, and we kind of wander through the creek and explore that area. And I always thought, it feels like this hidden gem within the city. And could there be this other way of opening up to the city and even an opening up to the bay? And so when I saw this, I was like, this is serendipitous. At that time, I was trying to think, well, what am I going to teach this autumn at UW? And so it was perfect timing. I think about a week after that, we got together as a group, including SBU, Seattle Public Utilities, Jonathan Gardner, Daniel DeGear, who's probably going to be here this afternoon or tomorrow, people from Seattle Parks. We all got together as a group, came down here and did a walk. We started at the beach and made our way up through the park, which is Whaletail Park, and the playfields up into the forest. We all stood around where the creek comes down at the end of the street and goes into a grate. They kind of just stood there, and you can kind of stand there and then look up to the forest, this beautiful forest, and you're like, there's a lot of opportunity here. Everyone kind of agreed that what would be the magic, how could we make this creek come down to the beach? And so together, I think everyone on that day really felt there's a great opportunity, but a sense of responsibility to make this a reality. And so from that process of that group getting together, over the last 10 weeks, the Masters of Landscape Architecture studio at University of Washington has been looking at how do you bring salmon back up to the forest as an idea. But if we have this opportunity to transform the landscape, what other elements come out of that? What other opportunities arise? And so the students, there's 9 of them in total. There's 3 different groups. One group is looking at the forest, which is behind us over here. One group is looking at the park, which is whale-tail playfields whale-tail playground and the playfields next to the school. And then we have the beach, which is by Dan Nye over there. Each one began looking at different opportunities. And so the beach, for example, began digging into it. What happens when you bring the creek down to the beach? And what kind of opportunities arise? They quickly began looking at climate change and sea level rise. And there's not an immediate need to begin thinking about just the creek and its relationship, but there's a future responsibility to think about this neighborhood. So you're going to hear them talk in a few minutes about what responsibility we have as designers, as landscape architects, to think about the role of the beach and climate change, but also bringing salmon to the beach. The park, you can see that the creek is moving through the Whale-tail Park, and the playfields is being reimagined, and how there can be a new ecology brought to the neighborhood as well. And as you make your way up into the forest group began to think not about just the forest itself, but how the forest is actually part of the neighborhood, and how the neighbors can become stewards of this place. And it's not just about the landscape itself, but a larger community that exists around the landscape. And so with that, what we're going to do over the next 20 to 25 minutes, I'd like to hand it over to the students. We're going to do a little bit of a tour, if that's okay. We can stand up, start warming ourselves up a little bit, move around. We're going to start with the forest group over here. They're going to give a little 5 to 10 minute presentation each and just walk us through their ideas. We're going to go forest, we're going to go to the park, and then we're going to go down to the beach and then to the water. I want to keep in mind this is a student studio project, so these are big ideas. And the intent is to think outside of the box, right? To really open our ideas up, our minds up to what is actually feasible and what's possible. So there's a plethora of ideas. And you can see there's beautiful models out here, there's drawings, and so as you go through, as each group presents, we can stop for a few minutes and do Q&A, just very briefly, but at the end what I'd like to do is the 3 groups go through, and then feel free to just walk through, explore the models, ask questions. The students are here, you're going to meet them as they present, and feel free to mingle around, look at the models and the drawings and ask questions. And the goal of this is to build community. Everyone's here has come together. Right? I'm sure at Schmitz Park Creek Restore, they've been working to build community. Again, this is kind of a nice next step in that process, so feel free to reach out to the Schmitz Park Creek Restore group and continue to help them in this process.
And indeed, and for those of you that are shy, there's a map over there out in the card, and if you want to leave comments on post-it notes or in a book that's alongside, please do, and we'll be delighted to have those and make those part of our thinking and creativity as we go forward.
Yeah. So let's start. Forest group, we can all gather over here and we can kind of go, we're going to basically do a loop through the space.
Do you want to walk over and use my phone?
Looking at the forest and how, if the screen were daylit, how the forest would interact with that process. And so as we began going through this studio process, we started framing our ideas around this idea of mending the watershed. And we quickly realized it wasn't just the creek or the forest, but it was this larger idea of the watershed that's really going to set up this forest for the future. And And so as we did that, we kind of identified sort of our three guiding North Stars here through our design. And it's a simple yet profound relationship that is happening in the forest. The creek exists because of the seeps. It's not surface flow that's feeding the creek, it's groundwater infiltrating in the surrounding neighborhood and dripping through this subterranean layer of saturated earth. And so there's the creek. And then the creek makes it possible for the forest to grow, right? That's where the water's coming from. So you have the forest and all those plant communities, which in turn will provide shade to the creek, which is an important thing for salmon to exist in the water. And right, the wildlife then live in the water, liven up that ecosystem, and then when they reach the ends of their lives, they put nitrogen back into the forest to feed the trees. So that's just one example of this profound relationship that's happening in the forest, and these three things are going to show up as we move through our designs.
Great. So this board is generally our concept of moving from the neighborhood into the forest of how we imagine supporting water, plant communities, and animals, particularly salmon, in our proposed design. So we have existing conditions up top, a lot of hardscaping, so houses, asphalt roadways, paved parking lots, particularly focusing on the Schmitz Park School. We have a large paved parking lot. And currently there's water that's feeding into the underground and feeding through seeps into the creek. There's not a lot of runoff that's actually feeding the creek, it's all of these underground seeps. So we were thinking, particularly in the climate future, as climate change is posing kind of a more and more imminent threat, how do we kind of increase the water that's going into the forest, ensure that these trees, particularly native species that rely on a lot of water, continue to be fed and nourished and supported. And as we hope to invite salmon back into the forest, how do we support those species with a more consistent year-round flow of water? So in broad strokes, we proposed unpaving a lot of these hardscapes, converting the parking lot into a bog, which, thanks to David Berkey, this space was historically a bog, and just kind of reimagining different ways that we can increase green space, increase permeability, and therefore increase water going into the forest. I can take this one. So this is generally our neighborhood framework. So we were imagining on the park scale, how do we connect the neighborhood into the forest? First, in so many ways, the forest has been kind of severed from the natural surrounding environment as development continues to progress in Seattle. Obviously, this project was inspired because the creek currently undergrounds at the corner of the forest here and just outlets about 200 yards into Elliott Bay. So how do we imagine not only daylighting the creek, but maybe expanding the forest further into the community to support the vegetation, the wildlife, connecting corridors from the forest into neighboring parks and green spaces, and just imagining more ways to increase permeability, increase permeation, and further support those three kind of North Star concepts that we're driving our project. I can also take this one, yes. Okay, so this is looking more closely at the park. These are our design interventions. So Danielle, the ecologist from Seattle Parks and Rec, very wonderfully lent us a lot of advice, particularly for salmon considerations. Currently the creek runs in a fairly straight line out of the forest, but to really increase surface area and habitat for salmon, we created a more natural kind of meandering creek network up through the park. We also decided to create a system of elevated boardwalks. Sedimentation generally is a good disrupts the eggs that are laying in the creek and just not good for the ecosystem. So by lifting people off the forest floor, it just leads to less disruption of the forest, enhanced salmon habitat, while still allowing folks to have a lot of different networks to enjoy this really beautiful ancient space. In our project, we also generally identified three parts of the forest. We describe them as the young foothills, which is the area before Schmitz Park Bridge. This is a more disturbed area, some younger vegetation. For plant folks, there's a lot of like big leaf maples, a lot of horsetail, a lot of younger vegetation. moving deeper into the forest, where the forest kind of widens out into a basin. We called that the mature basin. That's where you start getting into more of those ancient trees. There wasn't logging in the back of the forest, so some really beautiful old growth coming in, which leads to what we call the ancient ravine, kind of the oldest part of the forest that has those huge trees. You can see bald trees that already have huge trees growing out of those nurse logs. So just a lot of age and beauty in that back of the forest as well.
Yeah, and as you look down at these models as well, these correspond to those three parts, well, two of the three parts of the forest. This is that kind of younger foothills, showing what it might look like if the creek were daylit. And this is that kind of upper part of the ancient forest. And you see the difference in tree sizes and topography.
And last thing to mention, so we proposed a few main kind of corridors through the forest. The first one we called the Creek Walk. It comes from what the next group will be discussing, Patchwork Park, which is currently Whaletail Park. So it kind of switchbacks up the creek, leads you through the basin of the forest, and then takes you out by Schmitz Park Elementary School. We also have what we're calling the Forest Walk, which is a boardwalk that comes off either end of Schmitz Bridge, sticks to the grade of the forest, and just gives you a really beautiful walk through the trunks of these ancient trees, through this ancient forest. And finally, we have the Canopy Walk in the back of the forest, which we were, without limits, very imaginative, imagining as a suspended boardwalk, so you could go from 10 feet above the forest floor to up to 100 feet above the forest floor. So really in the canopies of these beautiful ancient trees, great for bird watchers, great for parents just walking their kids, taking a loop around the forest. It just offers so many different layers of experience to this really beautiful ancient space.
Moving on to the next board here, just briefly mention and invite you to come up closer once we're done to look at what all this information is. It's just this year kind of sectioned out into layers, looking at what the kind of interventions that are really focusing on the water collection, where those would be, and where those could be placed throughout the neighborhood. Then moving on to increasing biodiversity, right? Places where we can add more native plants, invite the forest to kind of spread out into the neighborhood. And then that trail network is shown in the third one there. And really how some trails can lead out into the neighborhood. Yeah, so a couple quick other things to mention. This is just looking at right, all the permeable surfaces around the homes, right? If you just imagine taking all those homes like a cookie cutter, punching out the private property parcels, what's left behind is all this space, right? Front yards, backyards, little alleyways. So it's really like utilizing that space in all three of these for different reasons. To that end, we then wanted to kind of, Dan had this great anecdote of in his backyard seeing kind of the forest like creeping in, seeds kind of getting dropped and like cedars sprouting up, salmonberry kind of crawling its way into his yard. So that idea really kind of led us to this, which is, what if there was kind of a system in the neighborhood where people could really cultivate those plants that come from the forest? And maybe if you don't want, you know, a ginormous western red cedar growing like right next to your house foundation, that's still a really like precious tree, and it came from this genetic material right from the forest. So what if there was a system for collecting those, taking them back to a nursery, which we're proposing could be up at the next to the elementary school at the top of the forest. You know, a community hub, everyone can kind of get involved, students can learn, take care of those plants, and then when there's a need to kind of restore a section of the forest, those plants can be put back. So that's what this is showing. We're going to flip around to the other side now. So this is kind of showing another neighborhood scene, what things might look like in the neighborhood. This is really looking at the edge of the forest. This is Hanford Street. There's a little trailhead here that heads into the forest. So what if kind of these streets, these connections could be softened, right? And the forest could actually be allowed to kind of come out into the streets. We could use, instead of having this pavement here, right? We could use that to collect the water and infiltrate it into the ground. So that's what this scene is showing. It's kind of showing a phasing. So imagining like, not all at once this would happen, right? All of this stuff would happen over decades, centuries potentially. So just first step, kind of remove some of that pavement. Second step, plant some native plants in there, and then as it starts to rain, that increasing permeable surface will gather that water and trickle it down into the groundwater. And now we're kind of heading into the forest. This is all sort of like we're out in the neighborhood, now we're coming into the forest and stuff.
Yeah, in the forest, I'll start by talking about our considerations for water flow in the forest. So starting in the more neighborhood side of the forest, kind of that ancient ravine that we discussed earlier, we are really considering how the seeps lead into the main portion of the creek. So this is a photo that I took while walking through Schmitz Park of a somewhat dilapidated portion of the upper forest, and just reimagining ways that we can use boardwalks to kind of protect that border between kind of human use as well as the creek, so that water can stay cleaner, less sedimentation, while allowing people to traverse throughout the forest. Moving into the center of the forest, that mature area of the forest, spawning pools are really beneficial for salmon. They're very particular about locations that they lay their eggs. Some of them prefer different water speeds, different temperatures, whether they like to lay kind of in the creek itself or in the pool. So just providing more opportunity, different experiences for salmon to have more variation of ecosystem to choose from. It also provides a great option for educational opportunities. There's 2 elementary schools neighboring either side of the forest. So the more that kids can kind of come up to these schools, see the salmon life cycle in action, just seems like a really great and engaging way to get folks involved in the forest as well. And finally, that takes us down to the daylighting portion of the forest. This is where the creek currently goes underground into a pipe at Southwest Stevens and 57. So just reimagining what that entryway could look like. Once again, seeing the boardwalk leading people into the forest, seeing the creek with greater water flow, greater ecology. Yeah, so those are our water interventions.
All right, and then finally here, I just kind of want to take everybody on a tour from the upper parts of the park all the way through the forest. So this is kind of looking at the elementary school up at the top and how it could be reimagined by removing some of the hard surfaces and giving room for a meadow and a bog area to bring people through the area. And then looking at the current entrance off of Hine Street and kind of removing some of the non-porous surfaces, removing the gate and the transformer, and kind of putting an archway as like a symbolic entrance to the park area, and how that could look and how people could interact with the forest. Then moving a little further into the forest here, we see what I'm calling a forgotten path, and how that could be transformed into the boardwalk and then a canopy walk. That'll take people through the ancient forest, ancient ravine, excuse me. And then moving over to here, this is kind of in the middle of the forest area, and having the second elevated walkway that could loop people around to see the spawning pool from above, and keeping people on a boardwalk to move through the forest from upper school to the lower school. And then finally, the last board here is kind of reimagining underneath Admiral Street Bridge. It seemed like a forgotten space that was really underutilized, and really trying to come up with a way people can interact with it, possibly have musical performances, and just a gathering place under the bridge. And then finally, this is looking at what the regrading of the daylit stream could look like. So removing the street and regrading the topography to add a boardwalk and allow the stream to make its way out to Puget Sound. So, thank you.
Maybe and Sarah.
We'll keep this brief, and then hopefully, get in there and explore our diagrams and let us know if you have questions. But just starting at a high level, taking on this, what's now a playfield, a couple tennis courts, and some play structures for kids right next to a school, and thinking about what do we do? We want to daylight this creek. This is the clearest path to get that creek from the forest to the sound, to Elliott Bay. So we sort of created a framework for ourselves in terms of things that we thought were important considerations to make when doing that. So creating this pathway both for salmon to come back into the forest and spawn and create this new ecological zone, and then also thinking about it as a connection. It's sort of a thread between these two beautiful spaces. Everyone enjoys Alki. not enough people enjoy Schmitz right now. A lot of people don't even know about it. So how do we have these two things come together and make it a really robust area for people to experience and enjoy? And then also honoring the history of the land as sacred ground, thinking about some of the histories. We know that there's potential for this to have been a burial ground for the indigenous peoples that lived here before settlers came, and kind of honoring that in different areas within our designs in the park. As well as just thinking about the historical aspect of the creek and where it used to come, and now it's underground, and bringing back that robustness that historically was there. And then thinking about how our designs in the park can foster community stewardship and get people more interested in these ecological processes, as well as aiding the school and adding further educational opportunities for kids and getting everyone excited about what our overall project is aiming to do. So, thinking through our plan, we kind of broke it down into a few different things. One, what are different experiences you could have within this park? Two, how do you circulate through the park? Where are your pathways? Three, where's the water going? What's happening? Where are the salmon flowing through our park? Two, based on these conditions that we're thinking about creating, what are those different habitat types? What types of plants will grow where? What type of plants will foster relationships with the insects that the salmon will eat? And where birds are going to come in, what kind of canopy do they need, and also what's the water level in the ground, and what is that? So that all kind of came to be based on our topography. We had to think about how do we reshape this land so that it can fit through. And then this is the plan. There's a lot of information on here, so come look at it. It's easy to read when you get up close, not so easy to read when you're further away, so get in there and take a look at it. Pass it over to these guys to break down some more details.
Yeah, I know Jack mentioned some of the increase in ecological diversity and just overall increase in habitat on the park. That was a big goal for us, and that meant having diverse conditions so that we can get all sorts of little habitats for different critters and creatures and our salmon coming through the creek, as well as for human use. So on our habitat types, we definitely want to consider that from the beach side of things, we're going to be dealing with some brackish water, meaning it's still salty. So we need to have some plants up towards that end of the park that can withstand that tidal flow with the salt coming in and out. And as we move higher up into the park, we can have a little bit more of a wetland condition, having more grasses and larger bushes, and keeping that filtration also of any stormwater off of the site, and making sure that we have ideal creek conditions for the salmon and other creatures in the creek. And as we move even further up, we know that as it is a park and wanting to carry through that value of the community being able to use this space, we definitely wanted to be able to have grassland, meadowscapes, so that folks can still have active play on site. And definitely having a buffered canopy on the edge. We have these great trees that line the historical Olmsted block, and definitely preserving as many as possible and continuing to build it out at the back end of the park with red cedar in particular. And definitely, more information on the board, so let me know if you have any questions about our plants and how folks are engaging with them. Yeah, I can continue on for the edge conditions. So talking about the habitat types also comes into what the edge of the creek really looks like, considering that we really want to have that diversity on the edge as well as water filtration, slope embankment stabilization, and also creating a shaded environment for the salmon in the creek. We want to have rocky edges as well. That creates kind of a curiosity. I know I like to kind of get up on a rocky edge of a shoreline, and people can peer down over, and also that creates more habitat space for invertebrates and other creatures from the creek. And also in the top right hand, this is kind of a brainstorming idea as a way to engage local community members to have a willow staking initiative from the get-go after the topography is created in the park, which is one of the first initiatives of the design phase, or it would be, to have the community come in and partake in actually creating this habitat, and to continue to do so over time. And also to have continuous features where human access is possible along the creek to either have educational opportunities or just to come and hang out by the creek and enjoy it. Yeah.
Over on the back side, we kind of divided it up from north to south as our ecological section, our historical section, and our play section. So our ecological section comes straight off of the beach, cutting through 59, and coming into the park. So right at the front, you have a condition where you can go down to the water's edge, but that is really about building habitat. You're kind of going from this very busy roadscape up into a very natural area, and so making sure that those plants are really tough and ready to handle being on an edge, and acting as a transition point into this larger, primarily ecological space. Within here, we have, you can see where the water line is on here. On a daily basis, or on a weekly basis at a regular high tide, the seawater would come about up to the mouth of where this opens up. At a king tide, it'll come farther up into about here where this section is taken. We've designed this park for a potentially 100-year storm surge situation with sea level rise, to make sure that it can accommodate all of the water that would be coming into the park. So there is a lot of space for the water as it currently stands, but with increased flows from the forest, hopefully, as well as sea level rise and larger storm events, we wanted to make sure that there was space for that to be a part of the park and not have it overwhelm. Moving into our history section, this section is dominated by incredibly dense plantings, as well as raised boardwalks. We wanted to elevate people off of the ground plane to honor the ground as something that's really important and something that has been obviously very heavily disturbed. It's a really well-used play space right now, but thinking about the importance of the ground we're standing on was very important to us, as well as just letting the habitat kind of do its thing and heal without having foot traffic on it, similar to the strategies that the forest is using. So most of this experience for people is above the ground plane rather than interacting with the landscape itself. And then we're moving back to the back end of the park. This is by the school, so we wanted to really include play in that. Obviously there are two playgrounds on the park site right now. There's Whaletail Park up in the corner, and there's the school playground down towards the back. We are proposing to move the Whaletail and the boat that everyone loves towards the back and include that in our play space. It's a really great complement to what we're talking about with the water coming through. And we wanted to think about raising play up above to really just make sure that it's a space that can stay dry and people can use it whenever they want to. So this is primarily grassy, kind of what you would think of as regular kind of playscape area, with a lot of the play happening up on this platform, which creates just kind of like a more fun, unique play experience. This is also where we're building out our larger canopy because it's farther away from the brackish water. So we'll be able to get some larger growth trees in here and really use it as a connection between the park itself and the forest that is directly behind it.
And Maisie kind of started to touch on this, but this is a good graphic to look at just in terms of sort of the context of what that tidal flooding looks like within the park. This is just our park topography, and then it's highlighting at your current high tide how far water from the sound would be coming in, and then at a king tide how far the water would be coming in, as well as king tide plus storm surge. And then you can look at that, how that looks in 100 years. So then you have this model rendering of what a 100-year flood might look like within the park, how much water actually would end up being on site. It's quite a bit. So. Okay, thank you.
Side of the beach that we are standing at and towards my left, we are thinking of, as we can see, discussed about the Pebble Beach and the recreational aspect of having maybe seating areas, lounge areas, as you can see in the pictures, and also creating that area where people can just talk through their day. So it's that idea that we have of having more recreational activities.
Here's the tide pool and the rain gather area. So the tide pool will create more safety space for people to swimming, and also the rain gather, you can see here's like a play area for the kids as well. So the rain gather also do the bioretention functions to fill to the storm water, and it will go down to the bay here, and it's also attractive to the animals, and people can have fun in that area.
On the last board is showing that sandy beach that's so beloved, but enhanced a little bit with some canopy coverage like umbrellas, different lounge seating, and you can see the dunes here. So you'd actually be entering the beach through these dunes that would kind of rise above you a little bit. So it's more of a gateway experience entering the beach. And then from the beach here, looking out would be those reefs that we mentioned. So the blocky structure of the seawall would be broken up and created something that looks like this. And under that would be a great opportunity for eelgrass. That's also going to help slow the storm surge from coming in and create habitat as well. And it'd be a really great opportunity to kayak between those and have something kind of to look out at when you're at the beach.
So you can see the model here.
Oh yeah.